Hello there and welcome to my review of The Dark Knight Rises, Christopher Nolan's final film in his Dark Knight trilogy. This film is a fitting end to what, for me, is the greatest trilogy of all time. I love the characters, I love the way Christopher Nolan handles them, and he gives us yet another really iconic villain, and Christian Bale gives quite possibly his best performance as the Dark Knight. This film picks up 6 years after where the Dark Knight left off, and we find Bruce Wayne, Batman, in retirement, kind of hiding after the events of that film. Crime is at an all-time low, and the people really don't know what has happened to Batman. They blamed him for the death of Harvey Dent. He took the fall for it, but as a result it allowed certain laws to be passed that allowed the police to really clean up the city. When mass terrorist Bane threatens the city, Bruce has to come back out of retirement and once again don the suit. There are not many third parts in a film franchise that you can say are just as good, if not better, than the preceding parts, but this is certainly one of them. I personally still find The Dark Knight to be the best of the three, but this gives it a close run for its money. Christopher Nolan goes epic in scale, and that really shows at the end of this film when he amasses quite possibly one of the largest number of extras that you're going to see in a modern day film. This really harks back to the old style of filmmaking when they didn't have CGI to fill in those numbers of people. They had to actually bring them in, and that's what Nolan does here, and it really adds to the climax, really gives it a sense of drama. I love what Nolan and Tom Hardy have done with the character of Bane. They've really changed him from the comics, but they've kept the essence of him. They've kept what makes that character who he is. If you know him from the comics, you'll be able to see all the elements from stories like Nightfall that they've kept in here. He's a real genuine threat, both physically and mentally, and we've never really seen in the Dark Knight trilogy until Bane a threat for Batman who can match him in both of those terms. I was a little sceptical when I first heard the announcement of Anne Hathaway to play Catwoman, or Selina Kyle, in this film. She's never actually referred to as Catwoman, but she absolutely blew me away in the same way that Heath Ledger did, because no one believed he would be a good Joker until we saw him up there on screen. But while Michelle Pfeiffer is still the quintessential Catwoman for me, Anne Hathaway still blew me away, and I loved what she did with this role. Michael Caine is, as usual, brilliant in the film as Alfred, but he kind of disappears after the first third of the film, and he doesn't really come back until right at the end, and that felt like a bit of a loss to me because he has been such a strong force in the rest of this franchise. Thankfully we still have Lucius Fox, as played by Morgan Freeman, and as usual we get a lot of moments of humour between him and Bruce Wayne. Ben Mendelsohn is really great as Daggett too. He plays him as a really slimy, grubby little businessman, and he's a great actor. If you've seen him in other films, you'll know that this is quite a departure for his other roles. He's very good at, he's almost chameleon-like in the roles that he's done. So when I saw him in other things after this, I realised just how good his performance here actually is. Of all the characters in the film, I would say that Matthew Modine's Foley is probably the weakest. I like Matthew Modine. I'm glad that he's come back to cinema in this film in quite a big way, but I just felt his character was a little bit weak, and the way that he gets dispatched at the end could have been much improved. I would have liked to have actually seen what happened to him. Instead we cut away, and then when we come back he's just lying there on the floor. Marion Cotillard's performance as Miranda Tate is for the most part really strong, but I felt that her death scene could have been handled a little bit better. I thought that scene was just a little bit wooden and actually made me kind of laugh a little bit, but it wasn't enough to damage this film in any way because it is just so strong on the whole. As a Batman fan, one of the downsides was that I could see the twist with Miranda Tate's character coming a mile off. I knew right from the beginning who she'd turn out to be, but this didn't really... It wasn't an upset for me. It didn't damage the film in any way. It was actually quite a good element of the film to see how Nolan played with that character and played with our expectations of that character. All the supporting players from the first two films are back, and they're just as great as usual. But also with this one we get Joseph Gordon-Levitt as Blake, Officer Blake, and I really like him in this role. His character is essentially the moral centre of the film. He's a very upright cop, but he very quickly comes to learn that doing everything by the book isn't necessarily going to be the best way to get things done. So the arc that he goes on raises some interesting questions, which is how much can you actually achieve when you work within the confines of the law, and is it better in that sense to go the way of the vigilante? I've heard a lot of people grumbling about the end of this film, how asking how does Bruce Wayne manage to get back to Gotham City, but it really doesn't bother me, because we see in Batman Begins that he's travelled the world. We see in The Dark Knight that he's funded a lot of Batman's equipment off the books. So it stands to reason that he would have resources planted in all corners of the globe. It's not really a big stretch to assume that this man who's been trained by the League of Shadows would be able to get back to Gotham. I love the first fight scene in this film between Batman and Bane. What makes it such a great fight scene is that it's not just people throwing punches and kicks. There's a real emotional intensity to it because of Bruce Wayne's state and his psychological state as well as his physical state. And because of who Bane is and what he represents, there's a real emotional intensity to the fight. It's just because it's all in the dialogue as well. They're not just going at it with the fists, that it's in the dialogue. The fact that Bruce was part of the League of Shadows and now Bane is essentially the League of Shadows. These two people are almost cut from the same cloth, but they've gone separate ways. They've gone in separate directions. One of them represents justice, while the other one represents anarchy masquerading as justice. These two people are really just opposite sides of the same coin. And for me, like I say, a good fight scene has to be physically well choreographed, but you also have to have an emotional investment in it. And this one has both. For me, it's my favourite fight scene of all time. While the final fight sequence in the film doesn't quite live up to the intensity of this one, it is still very entertaining, and it's good to see Bane really become like a beast in that. When he realises that he's going under and his mask kind of breaks and he turns into this animal and he punches through this wall, and you really see the ferocious nature of this guy, the power of this guy, uncontrolled. Tom Hardy's performance as Bane is absolutely brilliant. The voice he creates is so menacing, and it really feels like a modern day kind of Darth Vader, but much more animalistic, much more ferocious. And a lot of people have said that, well, they've complained about Bane's voice because they say they can't quite hear what he's saying, but I didn't have that problem. I mean, when I first watched this film, I saw it in IMAX, and the screen that I saw it in, I could hear every word that he says. There was one scene, and that's the scene when he snaps the guy's head. There's a couple lines of dialogue in that I didn't quite hear, which I picked up later when I watched it on DVD. But other than that, the rest of his dialogue throughout the film, I didn't have any problem. I could hear it just fine. So yeah, I think the performance is fantastic. I think the voice obviously has been done to death now from people copying it and taking the mick, but it really is just a testament to just how iconic that character and that portrayal of that character has become. I really love the scene when Bruce has to get out of the pit from the prison, when he makes the jump. It was a real emotional high for me when I first saw it. It got me revved up for the rest of the film, and it ties into the themes of the first film. The first film was all about fear and how you deal with it, and this scene in a sense is about bringing that fear back, allowing yourself to be afraid, because it's that fear that actually allows you to make the jump, because it's only when he loses the ropes that fear then comes in place, and that's the reason he makes the jump. So I like that going back to the themes that were set up in the first film. The music score this time around is just by Hans Zimmer. James Newton Howard, who helped him out on the first two films, isn't back for this one. And I really like the score. It's probably my second favourite of the three, The Dark Knight being my favourite. And I think Hans Zimmer does some really kind of far out work in this. And he got a load of fans to do some of the voice work for the chanting in the score, which I think is a really great way to involve the fans of the film. But it sounds great. It sounds absolutely brilliant, especially through a really good cinema system. I love how everything comes full circle in this film. I love that we get an appearance from Ra's al Ghul, even though it is just a dream. It kind of ties all the elements from each of the three films together. Probably more so with Batman Begins than it does with The Dark Knight, but we still feed from The Dark Knight because of everything that went on with Harvey Dent. All of these elements come together to really make this trilogy feel cohesive. You can't take away one part and still have the other two. If you do that, then the other two don't make sense, and that's really the stamp of any great trilogy. That's just one of the many reasons why this is my favourite trilogy and why this film gets a 10 out of 10. So if you've seen The Dark Knight Rises, comment below and let me know what you thought about it. And while you're at it, tell me what your favourite movie trilogy is of all time. Until next time, thanks for watching.